الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
Hi and welcome to Worlds Apart, a program that is committed to speaking the truth in love. I'm your host, Rommel Gussain, and today we have with us Dr. David Smith, who'll be speaking to us about ideologies that are truly worlds apart. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to always have you come here and share some of your insights with us. Now, a lot of the problems that we have with defining some of our terms here is because they've got an Arabic background, we really do need to define them. What I'd like to talk about on this particular episode is jihad. What is jihad?
Okay, the word jihad means to struggle. So having defined it as struggle, then the question is, where does the struggle occur? What are we struggling with? So at the very basic level, it is a spiritual struggle. That is, a personal struggle as to understanding my faith, how I should grow in my faith, how I should understand Allah, if in the case of a Muslim, how I should learn from the Quran, as a good Muslim would want to do, and perhaps learn from the Imam in the mosque. So that's the personal level of struggle. However, the struggle goes on, and at this point some people might feel this is an unfair statement, but unfortunately it's very true, even in the life of Muhammad, that he didn't just simply stop at a personal struggle. You might say it secondly became a social struggle, that is a struggle with other people that he met with in the marketplace and sought to help them to understand that he had learnt from the angel Gabriel certain facts about the reality that there is only one Allah and that all people should follow Allah. Now that was quite a big personal and social struggle for Muhammad. He started that off in Mecca, where was his original base, but when his financial support was lost, and mainly because his uncle, who was the head of his tribe, died, and his wife, who was some 40 years older than him, very much older, was also very wealthy when she died. He lost that financial support, and I'm afraid the other people in Mecca, for the most part, threw him out. And he went north then to another city up in the north called Medina, or Yathrib at that time. And so here the social struggle now becomes rather a stronger struggle. That it becomes a physical struggle. That is, when he went to Medina, he said to the people there, I want you to understand not only that there is only one Allah, but that I am his prophet, his final prophet, his perfect prophet, and therefore I want you to follow me as Allah's prophet. At this point there was resistance, strong resistance. And in due course he warned them that if they continued to resist, he would have to deal with that. He couldn't allow people to not accept who he is. And so it became a very physical struggle, and so it became an issue of terror. And within the Quran itself, Muhammad's revelation or reciting of what the angel Gabriel, he says, told him, there are a number of texts, such as, for instance, from Surah 8, verses 59, but also in the Surah 59, verse 13, where the fact that terror is a legitimate form of activity, if you like, a jihad, against those who refused to accept what he was teaching, which he regarded as being complete and final. And he went on to say, for instance, again in the Quran, in Surah 7, from verses 175 through to 177, he makes the point that if you reject his teaching of Islam, you are really like dogs. You are an evil person. And the point is, he would not tolerate dogs in his prisons, and he would not tolerate evil as he understood it. And therefore, jihad now takes on the form of killing. That is, that you need to kill somebody who's unwilling to accept the recitation that he gained from Gabriel, understanding that that was probably a revelation from Allah. And as he represented Allah, he regarded himself as Allah's ultimate and final prophet. You could use another term that he used occasionally, particularly in the hadiths later on, and that is that he was the vice-regent of Allah. And as the vice-regent, therefore, he was responsible to, in fact, kill anybody who objected to his teaching. So now jihad has taken on a much bigger framework, from being a personal struggle to being a social interaction struggle to now becoming a very strong struggle of violence. Now, obviously, not all Muslims will go down that track, and they're quite free, of course, to take a lesser track. But ultimately, that is the track that's outlined in the Quran. There are many texts about it, and those texts are quite clear. For instance, from Surah 4, 95 in the Quran, I've got a little bit of it in front of me, I'll just read it out. That not equal are the believers who sit at home and receive no hurt. For those who fight should fight in Allah's cause with their wealth and their lives. In other words, the point's very clear. You are the vice-regent of Allah if you're a believer, and therefore you've got a job to get out there and deal with those. And so we're again still in the fourth surah at this point now, the ayat 104. Do not relent in pursuing the enemy being anybody who's not accepting his teaching as the final and complete prophet.
So it's not an option, this is a religious duty for every Muslim, however they interpret it, whether it's a spiritual or a physical thing, but it's something that every Muslim has to take on.
Indeed. I mean, it's often regarded as the sixth pillar of Islam. It's not, of course, listed as that, but it's often regarded as that. But, of course, for a great bulk of Muslims, they will simply accept the personal struggle, and they don't want to admit that there is actually a physical struggle as well. But the physical struggle is clearly set out in the Quran. They may well choose to avoid it, but that doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And therefore, if you're going to follow Islamic ideology in any complete form, then you really have to take on board that requirement. And so the numerous events that have occurred around the world, sadly,
Prove that or point
that out.
Okay.
But it happened even immediately following Muhammad's death. In fact, it happened during Muhammad's life. There were tribes who resisted him and rejected his teaching. And so as he developed his own army, he went out after them. And they either had to confess, seek forgiveness, or they were indeed given the death sentence. And then once he died, then his comrades and followers then built up a very strong army program, and they scattered themselves right across the Mediterranean countries. And again, under threat of death, they were going to make sure that people became Muslims. And so jihad becomes linked with the fact of seeking to enable people to become Muslims.
So what's the teaching on, another thing now, what's the teaching on the greater and lesser jihad?
Well, the idea of the lesser jihad traditionally is that you are taking a stance to protect Islam, which of course many religious groups would want to do, to protect their own religion, if they felt the need to protect it. Interesting, because Christianity has never felt that need. And so the name of Jesus is often blasphemed, but no action's ever been taken about that. However, there is that sense that Muslims don't like people saying anything against Allah and Muhammad or the Quran. So that would be regarded as lesser jihad, simply protecting the religion. Whereas greater jihad is indeed to reach out to other people to ensure they become Muslims. Because, for instance, in Surah 3, verse 110, Muhammad declares that the best of peoples in the world are Muslims. And therefore, if you're going to be part of that better group, you must be a Muslim. And therefore, all Muslims have a responsibility to enable, to encourage, or to threaten other people to become Muslims as well.
And how does this word that we hear in Arabic, the mujahideen, come into this?
Well, they're a particular group of people who are concerned, again, in a sense, on both the lesser and the greater form of jihad. That is their concern. They want to get on with the job. They believe that peace can only come when the whole world is Islamicized. See, peace is quite a strong concept that Muslims will promote. But in reality, of course, the word doesn't mean that, although unfortunately there's often been that linkage. Muslim means to submit, it doesn't mean peace. But there is a sense of peace in that if and whenever the whole world becomes Islamic, then the world would be at peace. Well, that's the ultimate purpose of the Mujahideen. They would love to see the world all become Islamic.
We also hear about this hijrah, which is applied to the manner in which Muhammad himself escaped from Mecca to Medina, and there's this teaching in which this is applied in the same manner in which Muslims, particular groups of Muslims, when they do come over to non-Muslim countries, how they sort of build themselves up into communities and eventually basically get their ways and their forms in their religion to be practiced by the majority. Can you explain or talk a little bit about that?
Yes, well, it's actually an interesting principle that's being applied. A fundamental principle is that any good Muslim would want to behave in the way Muhammad behaved. He's the model of behaviour. And as he left Mecca, albeit under force, and moved up to Medina, and whilst he was in Medina, he changed Medina to make it entirely an Islamic, I was going to say state, but really, if you like, a city, an Islamic city. He being the governor, the judge, the ruler of the city, in due course having killed those who wouldn't be in agreement with him, of which there were many. And all of that's written up in his biography. So once he became the ruler of Medina, and it became very clear that Medina had been converted and became Islamic, then that is a principle, because that's the way Muhammad behaved, therefore all Muslims should behave in the same way. So if a Muslim person leaves his home country to live in another country for whatever reason, then that exercise of leaving his home country, which may well have been an Islamic state, is that he's doing the same that Muhammad was doing, going to another place to make that into an Islamic state as well. So their ultimate purpose is to Islamicize wherever they land. So that means Muslim migrants coming to, let's say, to a Western country, their ultimate purpose is to make that Western country like the country they've just left.
Are we talking about a majority of Muslims here, all Muslims, or a minority?
Well, the number who act in that way probably is a minority, in that we don't actually have any statistics to prove the point or to disprove it. But on the other hand, there are Muslim people, without a doubt, who leave their home country, usually for economic reasons, and go to another country and want to just quietly go about their business and hope that they'll make money and hope that they'll get good education for their children and just want to be quiet and don't necessarily want to change society, although they probably would love to see society changed.
They won't object to it,
they won't object to the process. On the other hand, there are plenty of others who do object and who want to make changes. And the way they'll make those changes is very carefully organised. It's predetermined. And the first step in that is what we call Sharia law. That is, they want to bring into that state the opportunity for Sharia law to be applied, which then means that there are Sharia courts to manage that. That's already happened in the UK. The US has had a number of states say they will not accept Sharia law, but a recent state did say they might allow it. Ontario in Canada allowed Sharia law in, and it was the Muslim women who objected to it because they become the victims of Sharia law, and they objected. They wanted to be kept under Western law. And so that's been a problem in Ontario. Other countries at the moment are struggling, trying to work out whether to allow it or not. But the process of Sharia law is the beginning of Islamicising a country.
And you see this to be a concern?
It's a concern for the West because it then means that you're now becoming discriminatory. You're saying that some people are under Sharia law and some aren't. Well, how do you work out who's under what? You ultimately have to ask, well, what religion are you? If you're a Muslim, then you come under Sharia law. That's a discriminatory question. Anybody in our society should be able to do any job they want to do, go to any educational institution they want to go to, without being questioned about their religious base. And the moment you make that question, it becomes discriminatory, particularly then if, as a result of that, you then say, therefore, you shall come under, or you will not come under, Sharia courts. So it is a problem, and it is a concern within the Western world, because then we have two legal systems. So, for instance, in the UK...
But is there anything fundamentally wrong with the Sharia law? Is it a preferable law? Would you find that it's a better law than the democratic law that we have?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that it's a very unacceptable law to the Western mind.
Because, I mean, you study it, that's why
Yes.
I'm asking you.
I don't see anything in Sharia law that's attractive, particularly its treatment of women. Women are victims. In the case of men, they're of course allowed to be polygamous under Sharia law. That could be debated. Some people might think that, well, you know, if you want to be polygamous, be polygamous. However, we have a strong Christian heritage within our Western world, and our Christian heritage doesn't allow polygamy. But I think the victimisation of women becomes a very real issue. Under divorce or death, the way the estate is handled, the right of a man to divorce his wife, the fact the wife cannot divorce the husband, the fact that a man who's a Muslim can marry anybody, the fact that a woman who is a Muslim can only marry a Muslim, not allowed to marry anybody, the fact that any marriages must occur in accordance with the requirement of parents, and that a teenager going off with somebody else is just... And under Sharia law, honour killing can occur. That is a person who somehow breaks the honour of the Ummah, that's the wide Muslim community, the global community, can indeed be honour killed for their failure. And all that's acceptable under Sharia law. So all of these things cut out human rights. So I would say our biggest single umbrella problem under Sharia law is the lack of human rights.
So is the Great Commission another version of the Islamic Jihad?
Well, it is in a sense, because you'd have to say that ultimately Muhammad's commission to his people was to go into all the world and make everybody a Muslim.
So it's the same?
Whereas Jesus' commission to the disciples was to go into all the world and disciple them, baptise them, enable them to understand what it means to be a Christian. But the difference between the two is that the Mohammedan commission is one of force, totalitarianism, and death. Whereas the Great Commission of Jesus is one of choice, of freedom, and an invitation.
What could you say, perhaps, to some of our viewers that would be listening now and they would be watching this program, and they're challenged by some of the things that you are talking about? Which is the better model, in your opinion, Muhammad or Jesus? And perhaps give us one or two reasons why.
Well, certainly, I think the dominant two reasons in my mind is, first of all, that under Jesus, I know I am forgiven, accounted righteous, simply accept that free gift of salvation. That changes my status straight away. That my status is now clear. It's a status that God has given me. It's a status about the sort of person I am before Him. Quite apart from how I might be before other people, but before God, I'm accounted righteous. The second big issue that I think matters is that God is a God of love. That is the God as revealed in the Bible. as against Allah, who's revealed in the Quran, doesn't appear to be a God of love. He's not described as the Allah of love. In fact, out of the 99 names that are attributed to Allah, not one of them is the word love. If there is some evidence in the Quran of love, and it's only that Allah loves those who've become Muslims, whereas the God of the Bible loves everybody and longs for them to come into a right relationship with him. So for people who are listening into this program, my comment to them would say, you have a choice. You can choose a totalitarian Allah who makes certain demands of you, or you can choose a loving God who calls you to be in a relationship with him and to reflect his character.
You've certainly given us some things to be able to think about there. I think the important thing to be able to get across is these differences so that people can choose. But perhaps someone that might be listening to you might turn around and perhaps label you and say, or ask this question, do you hate Muslims?
Interesting question, because I do get asked that. And I think I can make it very clear from my own friendships and relationships, no, that I don't indeed. That there's a real sense of care, of love, but it's a sense of care and love, not just from myself, but actually God's care and love that I'm trying to reflect out to them. I want them to know that the love that I have is the love that God has given me that I'm giving to them.
So I suppose that the aspects that you're concerned about are really the teachings, not so much the people. You separate the two.
I do separate the two. The people we need to love, to know, belong with. The ideology, like any ideology, can be debated. We have a right to pick it up, to deal with it, to discuss it, to examine it, to think about it, and to make our own decision.
Is this a central issue with the churches in reference to Islamization? Are you finding as you travel abroad, you travel from country to country, are you finding that more and more churches are interested with this, or is this just something that really they don't want to get into, or perhaps a taboo subject? What do you find?
There is a growing concern. In fact, I've just been reading about a group of churches in America that are actually putting a copy of the Quran in the church pews.
Wow.
So that people might have a better understanding of what is in the Quran, and that the minister up front is teaching a bit more about what is in the Quran, so that each individual can actually make their own comparison, so that you can compare the Bible with the Quran and see for yourself, how does Allah come through, or how does God come through? And so make a decision. So I would say there are some churches that are taking greater interest and being more concerned. However, there are many other churches that wish the whole thing would change and go away, let them get on with their job. Just simply be the church they are.
And is it something that you've discovered over the decades we should be concerned with as Christians?
I think as Christians we should be concerned about any person, A, if they are a Christian, to let them see how they continue to grow as a Christian, but B, if they're not a Christian, to let them see something of God's love.
So whether they're Muslim,
Hindu,
anything.
Buddhist, whatever. And throughout the world they all need to know, and indeed many of them do know. I mean, one of the great joys I've had is spending time with Christians in each of those countries, you know, whether they're Nepal, India, Pakistan, or the East Asian countries where Buddhism may dominate, just to sit with them and let them see, okay, let you tell me about your religion, let me tell you about Jesus. You see, I'm not really teaching about religion. I just want them to know who Jesus is.
Are you finding that there are more and more Muslims which are receiving Jesus as Lord and Saviour? What are you finding?
It's hard to give a statistical answer to that. There are places where some imams have said that there are more Muslims converting to Christianity. I'm not sure that I believe them. Nevertheless, there are Muslims becoming Christians throughout the world in many countries. So it is happening, but not an enormous factor, because it is very hard to break away from whatever your religious base might be.
Why is that?
Just because that's where your relationships are, where your cooperation is with other people, where your support may come from. It may be your family, but particularly the village or the town support will often be a religious one, and you don't want to lose that. But for all that, there are people who are willing to lose that for the sake of a right relationship with Jesus Christ.
Thank you once again. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It's always a pleasure to be able to have you come here and give us these talks. If I can just turn to our viewers now, and I really pray and hope that we haven't offended any person, but that you've been able to see perhaps some of the difference between the Islamic Jihad and the Great Commission. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to discuss these things openly. We pray, we hope, once again, that you would search for the truth yourself, that you would come to a knowledge of who the real Jesus is. And until then, please stay in tune for the very next episode. May the Lord bless you, and goodbye.